All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into one of the most audacious, really wild ideas out there. The idea that the entire history of philosophy isn't just a chaotic jumble of competing theories, but a single logical story unfolding over time. This was the revolutionary claim of Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel. But, before we can even get our heads around it, we have to face this huge paradox right at the center of it.
So Hegel, he doesn't waste any time. He puts this problem right on the table from the get-go. Look, philosophy is supposed to be all about finding the truth, right? Something eternal, something that never changes. But history is, by its very nature, the story of things that change, things that are born, live for a while, and then fade away. So how can something eternal even have a history? It just doesn't seem to add up. It feels like a total contradiction.
So think about it like this. On one hand, you've got what philosophy is aiming for, this timeless, permanent truth that's supposed to last forever. And on the other hand, you have history itself, which is basically this constant river of moments where everything eventually just gets washed away. Hegel's point is, if truth is really and truly eternal, it shouldn't have a past. It should just be. Okay, so this clash, this seeming contradiction, it leads to a really common and, let's be honest, pretty bleak way of looking at the history of philosophy. And it's a view that Hegel knew he had to take apart, piece by piece. And Hegel, he paints this incredible picture for us, a really vivid metaphor for this pessimistic view. He says, a lot of the time, we look at the history of philosophy, and all we see is this brutal battlefield, just covered with the bones of dead ideas. It's like every new philosophy that comes along doesn't just join the conversation, no, it kills and buries the one that came before it. Plato refutes the sophists, then Aristotle comes and tears down Plato's system, and this whole cycle of destruction just keeps going and going through the ages. So if you buy into this battlefield idea, you're pretty much guaranteed to end up at what we can call the futility argument. I mean, think about it. You see one genius after another claiming they found the final answer, only for the next generation to come along and prove them wrong. After a while, the conclusion just seems obvious, right? Finding philosophical truth must be impossible. And if that's the case, well, you can just dismiss the whole thing as a pointless game that never really goes anywhere. Now, this whole battlefield idea, it leads straight into another really common way to just write off philosophy. The thinking goes something like this. If no single philosophy can ever seem to win the war, then maybe they're not even fighting over objective truth in the first place. Maybe they're all just opinions, where every point of view is just as good as any other and, in the end, just as meaningless. But for Hegel, this is a complete and total misunderstanding of what philosophy is even about. And Hegel is super precise with his words here. You have to pay attention. For him, an opinion is not just any thought you happen to have. No, it's a very specific thing. It's a subjective idea. It's a thought that is just mine. It's all tied up in my personal feelings and my own perceptions, but it doesn't have that necessary universal quality of real truth. And right here, this is his big, powerful counterpunch. Hegel basically declares that real philosophy has zero opinions, at least not in that subjective way we just talked about. It's not about what you believe or what I happen to believe. It is, and this is crucial, the objective science of truth. It's about necessary knowledge, stuff that can be rationally understood, not just felt. It's a science, you guys, not a hobby. And listen, this isn't some brand new idea Hegel just cooked up. He traces this exact distinction all the way back to the ancient Greeks, especially Plato. Plato was the one who drew this really sharp line between what he called doxa, which is just mere opinion, and episteme, which is real, true scientific knowledge. So for Plato, and for Hegel following him, philosophy is all about that relentless hunt for episteme, leaving all that shifty, sandy ground of opinion far behind. Hegel then brings up this really famous moment to show where this it's all just opinion road eventually leads. You know the story. Christ says he's here to bear witness unto the truth. And what does Pilate say back? He just asks, cynically, what is truth? Now, Pilate isn't actually asking because he wants to know. It's a total dismissal. It's the sound of someone who has just given up on the very idea that objective truth could even exist. Okay, so let's recap. If the history of philosophy isn't a graveyard of dead ideas, and it's not just a big parade of personal opinions, then what in the world is it? This is where Hegel steps in with his own pretty radical retelling of the whole story. To get his point across, Hegel tells this fantastic little story, a parable. So picture this. There is an invalid, someone who's sick, and their doctor tells them, you need to eat fruit. Okay, so someone brings them a beautiful plate of cherries, plums, and grapes. But the invalid just pushes the plate away. They refuse to eat any of it, saying, well, this is a cherry and that's a plum, but none of them are fruit. You see the problem? They're so stuck on the abstract idea of fruit that they can't see that the only way fruit actually exists is in the particular fruits, like cherries and grapes. And that, Hegel says, is the exact same mistake people make when they look at the history of philosophy. They see Platonism, and then Stoicism, and then rationalism, and because they're all different, they throw their hands up and say, well, none of these can be the one true philosophy. They're missing the whole point. No matter how different all these systems seem, they have one massive thing in common. They are philosophy. They are all just different, particular ways that one universal quest shows up. And that right there brings us to the absolute core of Hegel's whole project. He's about to give us the master key, the one idea that completely transforms this whole history from a chaotic mess into a single, logical, and totally necessary story. He calls this key idea development. The German word is Entwicklung, which is even cooler because it literally means something like unfolding or unwrapping. And this is it. This is the master key. For Hegel, truth isn't some static thing like a treasure you have to dig up. No, truth is a living, breathing, dynamic process. It's the universal idea itself, slowly, gradually, unfolding itself through history, becoming more and more aware of what it actually is. Okay, but how does this unfolding actually work? Hegel breaks it down into a move between two states of being. First, everything starts out as just pure potential. He calls this being in itself. A great example is an acorn. An acorn isn't an oak tree yet, right? But the entire potential to become an oak tree is already packed inside it. Then, through the whole process of growth, that potential becomes real. It becomes actual. And he calls this state being for itself. The acorn has now become the oak tree that it was always meant to be. It's made its potential real. And this is the huge payoff. This is the grand conclusion of his whole argument. Every single philosophy throughout history is not a mistake that needs to be refuted. No, each one is a necessary, unavoidable step in this grand process of development. So Thales wasn't wrong. He was the absolute necessary first step. Plato wasn't refuted by Aristotle. His ideas were the necessary soil that Aristotle's ideas had to grow out of. It's all one single story of truth discovering itself. So by reframing history not as just a bunch of mistakes, but as one single rational story of development, Hegel really changes the whole game. We've just laid the groundwork here. We've only scratched the surface, and our journey into this is really just beginning. So make sure you join us for part 2, where we're going to dive deep into what exactly he means by the idea, the thing that's doing all of this unfolding. But for now, looking at history this way leaves us with this massive, unavoidable question. If the whole messy, chaotic history of human thought is actually one coherent, rational story, what is it trying to tell us? What is the final truth that's being revealed? Not just about the world, but about us.